A lot of brains on the same stage. Thank you all very much. Sorry.
All good. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much. We covered a lot in a few minutes. So I have to be very general on the questions, but one of the things that I'm most concerned about is how we're going to handle data when health goes digital. And it seems like every other single digital business model has become customer-centric, but health is kind of finding a lot of hurdles in regulators, in corporations, and culture, and business models. So do you think that the health industry will become customer-centric at any point? What's going to happen with data? What are governments going to do about it?
So,
probably Maneesh, you're...
so in an ideal world, from a scientific research perspective, we want to link all the data about us in one big data set to know what happened to us before we visit the doctor, at the doctor visit, afterwards, how the disease progresses, etc. However, then when you start to talk about building that big database, so recently Facebook were looking to, they had sent doctors into hospitals in the US to see, can we look Facebook's social graph data with the electronic medical record about you to get that linked information and truly understand much more and be able to prevent certain diseases. And after the Cambridge Analytica scandal, that project was cancelled, right? But it had good intentions, but because it's Facebook, remember, they have 2 billion users in one data set. And in fact, when it comes to drugs, that 2 billion data set is the biggest source or biggest database of side effects of drugs in the world. But it's with Facebook. So think about Amazon, what they're doing, what Google are doing, what all these private corporations are doing. And again, that's why from a European perspective, more and more people are saying, how can we take control of our data, have it almost in a, we have our own private store of data on the cloud, and then we negotiate and we control how it's used. But then, again, there's bias in that because many people may say we're afraid and we don't want to share it with this university for research, so then that can create problems in scientific research by giving people that choice.
Well, I would like to add in the news a few months or probably 1 or 2 years ago, the whole debate about the right to be forgotten. So if at some point you have given permission to all these big companies for your own data and information, will you have the right to at some point, okay, I want it back or I want everything to be erased? How are we going to deal with that?
Yeah, I've heard about many cases in people taking genetics tests and by accident finding out that they have a small percentage of a small chance of getting Parkinson's disease, and then they become unacceptable for an insurance company to be covered. So reading our genetic information may put us into may break the insurance business model, right? Because it disaligns the interest of the user, the health system, the insurance company. How is this going to pan out?
It's obviously a massive topic of discussion, and it's interesting because it highlights that insurance companies are in the business of not insuring people. Actually, they're trying to avoid, right? So the more data they can have to remove people at risk from their insurance policies, the better they perform. And I think it's something also that, for me, is interesting because it triggers questions in parallel and completely separate systems, such as insurance, but actually comes from genetics. So how do we take in genetic data, and what is the impact on actually neighboring industries like insurance? One of the things that I found in my work also at Desktop is data is also effectively a massive valuable, not a commodity, but it's a massive valuable asset, and that hospitals in the United States, for example, actually don't like sharing a lot of data because it attracts patients to come to them because they have the most data, and so that allows them to sell their services at a premium and allows them to gather more patients. And so it's an interesting also play because in a world in Europe where actually we're a lot more sort of open and community focused, but at the same time very respectful of personal data, in other geographies it's actually used as a marketing tool and as a differentiator for services. And I think the question of how it's going to be used in insurance here in Europe is being handled by things like GDPR, but as Maneesh showed, it also can be limiting when we have too much regulation blocking the use of genetic data or any kind of other healthcare data.
Svenja, do you want to add something?
Oh, I'm really happy with that answer. No, I can.
I have an alternative. There's two ways I want to go, but I'm not just going to go the hard way. I was in China 2 weeks ago, in Tianjin. Visiting China every couple of years is like living the Industrial Revolution, the next phase of the Industrial Revolution. They get over things very fast and then go to the next stage. A couple of years ago, it was WeChat and Alipay, no credit cards anymore. People would pay the taxi with a QR code. And now is cameras everywhere. The country has a huge bet on artificial intelligence, and they want to lead the way. I'm not exaggerating by saying that from the hotel to the conference center, at least 400 cameras were shooting us every day, like every 40 meters. So my question comes exactly where you left it. Like in Europe, we are aware of the importance of privacy and the right to forget and the individual's rights. So we created the GDPR, and we now have a regulation for data management. And China they don't care. They just go the short way. They step over many of what we consider fundamental rights of citizens. But at some point, if you want to lead the way in artificial intelligence, pattern recognition, gene sequencing, understanding what's in genetics, you may need brute force, volume, and speed. So in what position does this leave us? Is China going to be in a few years from now? And what are we going to do about it? That's an easy question, right?
Yeah.
So I think going back to my talk, so this frontier where at the moment, these machines and this AI is capturing relatively hard data about us, like, so we have fallen over or we have taken our medication. But again, when these machines link to these cameras and in real time, whether it's outside or indoors, so whether it's the local government or central government or the hospital or even your spouse, being able to monitor your emotional state in real time, whether you're driving your car, you're sitting in front of your TV watching Netflix, that link to that hard information, I'm not sure we're even having that conversation about what if they make a false decision in terms of the AI ranks us as we're really angry when we're in the crowd or we're really sad, and then makes a decision automatically based upon that emotion detection.
I mean, calling the cops while you're just watching a drama on TV.
Yeah.
Any more comments? I have a question for Svenja. I'm following very closely how these new technologies about building organs or building easing the way of making transplants are evolving. When do you think we're going to get to a point where what we build is better than what we have? So people wanting to make a transition into the digital or the new artificial technology to substitute actually a working organism or working.
So I think we are at the moment really far away from a complete working organ. We are happy with simple structures. We are happy, like what I showed, the electrospan scaffold. It's far away from being the original organ or the original tissue. And we are really far away from that. And we are happy with small steps at the moment. And there is so much unknown also in the field of medicine that it's hard to say how fast this will move forward, because I think the technology, as soon as I know what I have to re-engineer, I would say it's kind of easy. But we still do not know what exactly do we have to do. How is this interaction between all those different parameters? And as soon as we do not know that, I don't think that we will have an organ which is better than the one we have. And I think, to be honest, I think we all don't make it to that point where we have better organs than the ones which were grown in our body from the beginning.
Anyone else want to comment on that?
Well, so I was just curious about, in terms of thinking about everyone's talks, how does it all link together in terms of, at some point of this century, does the AI and all these information systems, do they automatically make decisions like, oh, we've detected that your heart is deteriorating, and like we've ordered a replacement, it'll be, it's 2065, and it automatically gets 3D printed and customized for your genetic sequence, etc. Like, is that where we're heading?
What I would like to add is that, as in any past history of technological development, We are humans who created the technology, so we have a responsibility on how we use it, to what purpose, and yeah, we need to, how to say, taking a very simple example like what you showed in your talk. If at some point I have a car, I don't need the watch to tell me you should walk. So at some point we might work better on educating the society, on understanding how technology works, what is good, what is bad, and educating also on where are the limits and where are the balances that we should do, and leave a bit of freedom of choice and some check and balances to make sure that no foreign power or some company makes profit out of, how to say, we not knowing that our private life is being manipulated.
I think your point about education is really well taken, because the scientific community has a huge responsibility to play in that. And in terms of how do they communicate their research, using the right words, using the right language, so that it don't, alarm people. And then the press also has to respect that. And when they're talking about a technology like CRISPR, one of the things that alarmed me quite quickly is when it came out, the press completely sort of looked over the fact that it takes 10 to 15 years to take a drug to market, and for a technology like CRISPR, probably add another 10 on top of that to actually characterize and understand the technology. And so it's not just the role of the scientists, it's also the role of the press and the people who communicate that technology. It's very, very important. But the scientists themselves take control of how they want to communicate the technology. We had a lot of issues when molecular cloning came out back in the 90s, and a huge sort of negative perspective. But with CRISPR, the scientists who invented CRISPR and the early adopters actually came together and made talks and conferences about how do we communicate about a technology like CRISPR in a way that's positive, that highlights all the work we still have to do, but actually shows to people this is where we won't go, this is where we are focusing, and these are our challenges. And I think that the education is a huge piece of that.
Yeah, I think those signs of warning are a good place to leave it there. I feel very lucky to share the stage with so much talent, and I want to thank you for joining us today at MTech. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.